ASP.NET Development Services, Use Cases, Architecture Choices, and Pricing. So, ASP.NET Development Services. It's something a lot of people ask about, and today we're going to walk through it step by step. Moving on to what ASP.NET Development Services actually cover. The term gets used loosely, so let's be specific. ASP.NET Development Services generally break into three delivery tracks: building net new web applications and APIs, modernizing existing .NET framework applications, and integrating .NET systems into broader enterprise architectures. A .NET development company working at enterprise scale typically handles all three. Knowing which track you need shapes every conversation about scope, timeline, and cost. The most common engagement type is a purpose-built web application, a customer portal, an operations dashboard, a B2B ordering system. ASP.NET Core is the framework of choice here because of its performance characteristics, its strong support for REST and gRPC APIs, and a mature ecosystem of libraries. The .NET 9 migration improvements to containerized deployment on Azure Kubernetes Service made startup times and throughput meaningfully better compared to earlier versions. API development services in the .NET world almost always start with ASP.NET Core Web API as the foundation, with decisions around authentication, versioning strategy, and OpenAPI documentation. The choices you make at this stage affect how easily other systems connect to your platform later. Getting the API contract right before you have multiple consumers is considerably cheaper than changing it after. Moving on to 6 core use cases for ASP.NET Development Services. Healthcare is one of the most active areas for .NET custom software development right now. Patient portals, EHR integrations, appointment scheduling engines, and clinical decision support tools all require the type safety, structured logging, and audit trail support that .NET handles well. Combine that with Azure Health Data Services for FHIR compliance and you have a defensible architecture for HIPAA-regulated workloads. The framework's support for background services and message queuing also makes it practical for asynchronous lab result delivery and notification pipelines. Logistics and supply chain platforms represent the second major use case. Fleet management, warehouse management, multi-carrier shipping integrations, and real-time tracking dashboards run well on ASP.NET because the framework handles high-throughput background processing through hosted services and queued messaging, typically via Azure Service Bus or RabbitMQ. Supply chain visibility is a growing pain point for mid-size companies in 2026, and .NET's performance characteristics matter when you're processing tens of thousands of shipment events per hour. Banking and fintech applications sit in a similar category. PCI DSS compliance requirements, transaction logging, and strict latency budgets make .NET a natural fit. The framework's mature libraries for cryptography, secure token handling, and structured audit logging reduce compliance surface area compared to lighter alternatives. Next up, moving on to architecture choices, microservices, modular monolith, and blazor. Architecture decisions made early are expensive to reverse. Here's how to think through the main choices before you commit to a direction. .NET microservices consulting conversations almost always start with the same question: we want to go microservices. Is our team ready? The honest answer is that most teams are not ready, and most applications don't need it yet. Microservices make sense when you have at least 3 of these conditions: independent deployment requirements across subsystems, teams of 8+ engineers that need to work without blocking each other, significantly different scaling profiles across components, and the operational maturity to run distributed tracing and service mesh tooling. Without those conditions, microservices add complexity without delivering the promised agility. Next up, how .NET application modernization actually works. The Strangler Fig pattern is the standard approach for legacy .NET framework modernization. The concept, described in detail by Martin Fowler, comes from a fig tree that grows around a host tree and eventually replaces it. In software terms, you build new services alongside the legacy system and gradually route traffic to them until the old code can be retired without a high-risk cutover. Legacy .NET framework modernization uses the Strangler Fig pattern to incrementally replace components without full rewrites, which matters because full rewrites fail at a statistically high rate. The pattern lets you deliver business value throughout the modernization rather than asking stakeholders to wait 18 months for a big bang release that may never fully arrive. Practically, this means identifying the seams in your existing application, usually along HTTP boundaries or database table ownership, and building new .NET 8.9 services that handle one bounded context at a time. The legacy application routes requests to the new service as each piece completes. .NET Application Modernization, a 5-phase roadmap from legacy to cloud-native, walks through the full-phased approach with realistic timelines for each stage. Moving on to ASP.NET Development Services Pricing Guide. Pricing for ASP.NET Development Services depends on 4 variables: project complexity, team composition, engagement model, and geography. Here's how each plays out in practice, with real numbers rather than ranges so wide they're useless. Fixed price engagements work when scope is fully defined and unlikely to change. This is rare for anything beyond a simple integration or a tightly specified internal tool. Fixed price on a complex enterprise application almost always ends in scope disputes or quality compromises, because the vendor bakes contingency into the price and cuts corners when that contingency runs low. Time and materials is the industry standard for most enterprise application development work. It requires more active client involvement in prioritization and backlog management, but it produces better outcomes because the team can respond to what's discovered during development rather than what was assumed in a pre-project specification written before anyone touched the problem. Let's talk about how to choose the right .NET development company. The capabilities that matter most for ASP.NET Development Services are often invisible in a proposal. Ask these directly before you commit. Q Services specializes in .NET modernization with human-in-the-loop governance for enterprise applications, meaning architecture decisions go through structured review rather than being left to individual developer judgment. This matters for regulated industries where the decision trail is as important as the decision itself. Beyond technical delivery, an enterprise development partner should share their thinking, not just their output. That means architectural guidance, documentation your internal team can maintain, and a handoff process that doesn't leave you dependent on the vendor for every future change. Now, next up, conclusion. ASP.NET Development Services cover a wide range of project types, from greenfield SaaS products to complex .NET application modernization of systems that have been running for a decade or more. The framework is mature, backed by Microsoft's long-term roadmap, and well-suited to organizations in healthcare, finance, logistics, and enterprise SaaS that are already invested in the Microsoft stack. The decisions that matter most, monolith versus microservices, blazor versus React, modernize versus rewrite, have right answers in specific contexts, not universal ones. Getting those calls right early is where a qualified enterprise application development partner earns their engagement fee. If you're evaluating .NET for a new build or working through a modernization roadmap, Q Services can help you structure the architecture and deliver with the governance discipline that complex systems require. Contact us to start the conversation.